Hi there, I'm Audrey Adams, and this is Talk with Audrey, insightful, intelligent information to help you improve the quality of your life or someone else's. The birth of a child is a joyous occasion for the entire family, but for the families of babies born with birth defects each year, it also brings some fear and uncertainty. Joining me, Dr. Holly Hedrick, the attending surgeon for the Division of Thoracic and Fetal Surgery at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, specializes in treating these babies' unique needs, and she joins me to tell us all about it. Welcome to Talk with Audrey.
Thank you.
Very welcome. So January is Birth Defects Awareness Month, but this is something that you deal with on a daily basis. How many babies are born each year with birth defects?
The statistics are 1 in 33 babies, or approximately 150,000 in the United States per year.
Wow, that's quite a number. And how many of those babies do you think that the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia sees?
Since the opening of the Center for Fetal Diagnosis and Treatment in 1995, we have had over 13,000 referrals for children with birth defects, and approximately 1,000 of those have undergone an intervention before the baby's born, or a fetal surgery.
And this is really unique. But when it comes to the birth defects, because this fetal surgery I'm just fascinated with, what are some of the most common birth defects that you can correct in utero?
So the most common birth defect to have open fetal surgery as an indication is spina bifida, or neural tube defect.
Yes.
That's the closure of an opening in the baby's back where the neural elements are exposed.
And in addition to that, there are other types of surgeries that can correct birth defects?
So there are other types of birth defects that could be helped by having a procedure before the baby's born. The most common of those would be babies or pregnancies complicated by twin-twin transfusion syndrome, where they share vascular communications, and if we delete these vascular communications, then hopefully both babies can survive, versus in some cases certain demise of both if nothing is done.
So spina bifida is one that I've heard a great deal about. What can having surgery in the womb do to help the baby for the rest of its life once it's born?
So the idea is that if these neural elements, because the back didn't close completely, if the neural tube didn't close, then the nerves are exposed and the spinal cord is exposed. And it's exposed to trauma, it's exposed to the things in the amniotic fluid that can injure it. And so if you actually cover this or close it before the baby's born, then you can prevent some of this damage so that you can have improved function after the baby's born. In addition, the babies with spina bifida often get hindbrain herniation, which then causes water on the brain, or hydrocephalus, and so closing the back before the baby's born can ameliorate that, so that these babies don't have the degree of hydrocephalus and don't need VP shunts as often as if the back remained open.
So what you're really talking about then is an improvement in the quality of life once that child is born.
That's right. So it doesn't take away the fact that the baby has that birth defect, but it does improve the quality of life. And we also hope that down the line these babies will function better in terms of walking, in terms of functioning at a higher level than they would have been expected to.
So that means that for women who are pregnant, it's also very important to continuously see your doctor, because these things can be pre-diagnosed.
Yes, frequently these things can be diagnosed before birth, and even if there isn't a fetal intervention that's indicated, just knowing that a birth defect is there and knowing how to best deal with it right from the get-go when the baby's born can really be a game changer for these babies and their families. Families get educated, then families plan for where they want this baby delivered and how they want the care to go after the baby's born, really no matter what the birth defect is.
And when it comes to identifying the birth defect, is that normally done through, amniocentesis or imaging of some sort?
The most common way, you've got it, the most common way to diagnose it before a baby's born is ultrasound. And so that could be the first inkling. But as you've indicated, sometimes that first ultrasound may not show anything. It's the subsequent pictures that sometimes show the inkling of a problem, and then more detailed imaging, which could include a fetal MRI, which is very detailed, a very specialized procedure, can show us even greater detail.
And when you are in the operating room, operating on a woman who is pregnant. Well, actually, you're operating on both at the same time. What are the complications that can be involved in that case?
Well, there's a huge team to hopefully prevent the complications, and so that includes a maternal fetal medicine specialist, ultrasonographers, cardiology, continuously monitoring the baby's heartbeat, fetal surgeons like myself. And the things that we worry about first are just getting through that operation, and so that involves making an incision in the mother, partially delivering the uterus, opening the uterus, partially delivering a part of that baby to operate on, doing the procedure, then putting the baby back inside the uterus, closing the uterus, closing the mom, waking the mom up, and then keeping the mom pregnant for weeks and weeks. And so all of those steps have a potential to have a problem. So
it's fascinating. So you actually sort of pre-deliver the child in order to, you pre-deliver the child in order to operate separate and apart from the mother, basically.
Well, the child or the baby really stays inside the mom's uterus, and we only would expose that part that we need to work on. So in the case of a spina bifida or a neural tube defect, we just rotate the baby so we can see the back through the opening of the mother. And so the sort of the wave of the future is to reduce those incisions to be smaller and smaller, and that exposure to be less and less, because that will decrease the complications, decrease the risk of preterm labor. And so just a small opening exposed just that part of the baby. It's not really brought out. Okay. We just want to see the part that we need to work on.
Wow. And at what point in the age of the fetus are you able to do this?
So it's usually in the mid-gestation. So prior to 25 weeks, or in the case of spina bifida. So if we wait too long to see the problem, then it actually becomes too late to do anything about it.
Wow, that is incredible. I can only imagine how you must feel when you're able to help improve the life of a child before it even enters the world. It's just amazing to me what medical science has achieved. So where can people find some more information about this?
We have a website. It's fetalsurgery.chop.edu.
All right. Amazing work that you guys are doing there. Thank you so much, Dr. Holly Hedrick, for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, Audrey.
We'll be right back after this.
And still to come, the author of Smart Trust, Stephen Covey, talks all about sustainable success and what leaders and enterprises are doing to prosper against the odds. And it's all about you, how to build your own brand. Professional development expert Michael Beavis on how to go beyond your resume to succeed in today's job market. Coming up next, I have joining me Chris McChesney, one of the best-selling authors of the book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, Achieving Your Wildly Important Goals.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Hi there, I'm Audrey Adams, and this is Talk with Audrey. We're going to talk business today. Yep, yours if you're an entrepreneur, and if you're part of a larger organization, we're going to talk about, maybe what you can do to help them improve their performance. And as you know, we can all establish goals, but once you get started, you often find that it's quite another thing to execute them. So why does execution fail so often? Chris McChesney, the global practice leader of execution for Franklin Covey, and co-authors Sean Covey and Jim Holling have spent more than a decade studying why execution fails and what can be done to fix it. Chris McChesney joins me to discuss the results of their findings and their new book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, Achieving Your Wildly Important Goals, and what you can do today to start turning your goals into reality. Welcome, Chris McChesney, to Talk with Audrey.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
The Disciplines of Execution sounds a little,
I know, it's a harsh title, right? Disciplines of Execution.
It is, actually. But achieving your wildly important goals, I think, is something that everybody wants to do. And execution of those ideas is often the most difficult aspect. But for the purposes of our conversation, let's talk about, because you start out with, it's not just the what, but how effective the executing the strategy is to achieve. So what is the what and the how?
Yeah, very good. You know, when we started with this 10 years ago, one of the things we realized is that so much of the business education that people go through, whether they're taking business classes or they get an MBA, is aimed at the strategy. It's the plan, what we want to accomplish. And there's always this assumption that, well, geez, if I'm in charge, you know, if these people work for me, then they'll do it, right? It'll happen. And a lot of strategies, a lot of plans, you know, if you have the money and the authority, you can make them happen with the stroke of a pen. But what leaders realize very quickly is, wait a minute, there's a whole lot of people whose behavior has to change if we're going to implement some of these strategies, and it gets very hard very quickly.
And it gets very hard very quickly because there's nothing in place to execute the strategy, right?
Yeah. And what we find is that even, you know, the best laid plans and the best thought out desires of the leaders to improve the customer service, you know, intimacy, to create a new sales strategy or to promote a new product, all these things tend to run in to another force that's in place in the organization, which is the day-to-day real operational work. Mm-hmm. And new plans, and this is the thing that we've seen over and over again, a lot of the new plans that leaders are wrestling with are always running headlong into all the work required to just maintain the operation. And this creates a great deal of frustration, and it's a very sort of a universal leadership dilemma that we've seen everywhere.
So the strategy is sometimes lost in the day-to-day work of running a company, being sure that you continue to grow, but you need new strategies in order to sustain success.
That's perfectly said. And you know, we don't often differentiate between these two things because they're both very important, right? We have to maintain the day-to-day operation, but we also have to do things to improve. Well, the problem is the day-to-day operations are urgent. And the things we need to do to improve, the new plan, the new strategy, that's important. But when urgency and importance fight, time after time after time, urgency wins. You know, people might even agree with your plan. They might even agree with where you're going and what you're doing, but it's always tomorrow. And you know, that's great, boss, but, you know, I got to get back to the real work. You keep thinking, Chief, you know. And every you know, when you talk to leaders about that, they get this big smile on their face because they just lived that an hour earlier.
Well, so then how do leaders, in order to manage their companies in times of change, I know that you need strategies, and you have to have those strategies executed in order to continue to grow and sustain. But if you're doing the busy work of maintaining the business every day, how do you then add additional, what a lot of employees, if you will, would consider extra work on top of what it is they are already doing to keep things running smoothly?
You're asking the $1 million, in many cases, multi-million dollar question, right? Everybody's already completely consumed. And when we started this work on the 4 disciplines of execution, 10 years ago, this was the question that we were going after. And we've honed and worked the disciplines for 10 years, and you can look at each of the disciplines as a step. But I'll give you the bottom line. If you step back away from each of the steps, and there's the first step's about focus, and the second step's about leverage, the third one's about engagement, and the fourth one's about accountability. But if you step away, here's the bottom line. We found that you actually sort of make a game out of it. And you don't have to call it a game, but we found that if it doesn't feel like a game, you won't engage people. And even though there's a lot of work that's already going on in the organization, if there's a very focused finish line, if there's something that the team feels that they can win at, that's the first discipline. The second discipline is the team's figured out how they're going to play the game. There's always a few key aspects. We call them lead measures. That's the second discipline. That if they know those key leverage points or measures, right? For instance, the game in weight loss is calories, right? Diet and exercise to lose weight. Those are the lead measures. Or if your kid's wants to do better in school, it's their homework average and the amount of time they spend on grades. And we always find that wherever the goal is, there's always some key lead measures. That's the second discipline. The third one is the scoreboard. Create a compelling scoreboard. And this literally is putting it in something that feels like and looks like a game. I can look at it, I know the score, and I know if I'm winning or losing. And then finally, the team is going back. We call it a cadence of accountability. That's the fourth discipline. That every week the team is looking at, okay, are we winning or losing, and what's the commitment this week to keep it moving? And if you can keep that process alive even for a couple of weeks, there's this sort of game theory that seems to take hold. And we've now had over 1,000 implementations of this methodology, and what we see is whenever you start to get this game theory sort of mentality to work, you go through the wall. It starts to happen.
So what you need then is leadership that's consistent, that demands consistency from its team in order to implement the strategies and reach the goals. Yeah,
that's well said. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest traps that leaders tend to fall in, and I think you could categorize it under consistency, is they try to do too much. Mm-hmm. They try to attack on too many fronts simultaneously because they can see the needs. This needs to be fixed, and we need to get one of these, and we need to be better at this. And let's not forget about our cost issues. And by the way, what about client churn? And there's so many things in any business operation that need to be addressed every single day. That the biggest challenge that we've seen, and the way it comes across, Audrey, is consistency. The organization feels like, okay, what are we attacking today? Mm-hmm. We're going after, last week? Okay, now what's this week? And what they'll end up doing is they just go back to the day job.
Right. Because there has to be consistency in place.
Yeah. And one of the things that we've seen is that if you're changing your strategy too often, you actually make your culture immune to strategy. They develop an immune system to you.
And instead they develop like confusion, right? It's like, well, what's going on? What is it you're expecting of us? And so do you think then that once you've decided what to do, the greatest challenge then is not only getting people to execute it, but you also need them to perform at a level of excellence you need to produce the results?
Yeah. No question. And I think at some point, one of the things we've seen is when you pick a particular target and an organization gets very serious and they create, in a sense, that game out of it, or they throw this switch in their head called game on. Mm-hmm. So in addition to maintaining the operation, the team gets very focused on winning at something. At some point, that level of performance becomes natural, and it becomes the way we do things, and that becomes just part of the day-to-day operation. And the team moves on and they pick something else. And this is what we've seen really high-performing leaders do. We have this little term we call land one plane at a time. And that's very counterintuitive. The natural tendency is for leaders to want to attack too many things simultaneously because they are all crying. They're all asking for your attention.
Do you find that, because I know that Franklin Covey talks a lot about the importance of leadership, do you think that most leaders are committed to becoming better leaders at this point, or do you think that leaders are trying to maintain their position and hoping in the process to become better leaders?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the ways you could say that is are they playing to win, or are they playing not to lose?
There you go.
Right. Right? Mm-hmm. And you get this vibe very quickly with leaders. Some are in a very defensive position, and certain cultures tend to breed that. Others are more aggressive, less risk averse. And they're trying to move towards an objective. One of the things that we also saw with the four disciplines is that when you get these disciplines embedded, it gives a leader a blueprint for how to attack something, as opposed to just feeling like they're on the defensive all the time. And they're just sort of waiting for the next shoe to drop. And I just got to survive until Friday. If I can just get through the week, I'll be happy. As opposed to helping them feel like, boy, I can win at something, this team can win at something. So we see, I guess to answer your question, Audrey, we see a mix of both, but a big part of what we're doing is to help leaders feel like they can be on the offensive. We had an amazing case study with Comcast in Chicago. They turned their operation, the Chicago division of Comcast was was the lowest performing division in the organization, and they had an enormous turnaround over the last 2 years. They won region of the year this year. Went from number 20 to number 1. But the leader, Leanne Talbot, she made a really profound comment when she started working with us. She said, "I want my people to feel like they can win at something." This group had lost on so many fronts for so long. She said that they've forgotten how to win. And she sort of embraced this 4 disciplines methodology as a way to get her team feeling like they could win at something instead of just being on their heels all the time. And we've found that psychologically that's very important for people to feel like they can win at something. And it starts with the leader.
Right. And in her case, it sounds to me like she stood back and took a good look at her team and said, okay, this is what I feel we need, and how can I improve upon my leadership to improve the circumstances of the business? And do you think that there are a lot of leaders, Chris, these days that want to do that?
It's great. Boy, that's a great question. Yeah, once they sort of get the idea in their head, the problem is that this, we call the day-to-day operation the whirlwind, right? Everything that has to be maintained, it tends to be so overwhelming. They're so distracted so much of the time, right? The phone's in your pocket, the emails. It's funny, even when we're teaching people, we have them in the room for an hour. At the end of the hour, we tease them. We say, you're jonesing for an email right now. And they all laugh because they just can't. They're suffocated by the day job. So it's almost like if they can just hold their breath long enough to say, okay, we're going to bring something down. People tend to respond very well to that idea.
Yes.
The enemy, ironically, is life support. They have to keep the business running, and if they can't, and this is a good measure, I think, of good leadership, and I think it's a question every leader can ask themselves. Am I the kind of leader who's just barely keeping their head above water? I'm doing everything I can just to hang on. Or can I maintain the operation, but also, target something and go after it and win at something? And you can really divide leaders almost into those two camps.
And also, leaders have to be willing to develop new leaders within their organizations. That, I think, is also key. And your book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, I found interesting because you have to change your behavior. And that means everybody, from those people who think that they are the brightest bulbs in the room to those people who might not have a light on. But I think that there's leadership in each and every one of us. And when business leaders begin to realize that people don't just work for them, but they also work with them, and they have ideas, that this whole idea of executing your strategies effectively will work.
Yes. Yeah. And I like the way that you stated that. It really starts with that intent. People are very attuned to the intent of the leaders that they work for. And when a leader has that kind of intent, that they want to walk the talk, that they want to involve other people, it has an immediate effect. They're much more willing to work with you as opposed to just working for you.
Well, I say get them all a copy of the 4 Disciplines of Execution.
Well, it was a lot of fun, Audrey. This started off as a very sort of a tactical, precision. Here's what you need for results. And what we found was, wow, if you can engage people in the game of work and winning at something, the morale and the engagement go through the roof. This isn't just a book about getting results, although that's how it started 10 years ago. We waited 10 years to write the book, but what we found was that this is really a work about how to engage a team.
Yes, because it keeps changing, right?
Yep.
It's always fluid, like business and people's behaviors. And you have to grow into new behaviors in order to grow into new successful and sustained businesses. Wow, it was a great book. Thank you so much.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
My guest has been Chris McChesney. We've been talking about the 4 Disciplines of Execution. If you want to achieve your goals, why don't you have a read, refocus, retool, become your own leader, and create leaders within your own organization. Thanks for joining me, Chris, on Talk with Audrey.
Thanks, Audrey.
My pleasure, and we'll be right back after this.
When we come back, the author of Smart Trust, Stephen Covey, talks all about sustainable success and what leaders and enterprises are doing to prosper against the odds. And it's all about you, how to build your own brand. Professional development expert Michael Beavis on how to go beyond your resume to succeed in today's job market.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Hi there, I'm Audrey Adams. You're listening to Talk with Audrey. Trust is something that has been lacking the last few years. Joining me today is Stephen